It started with a drink, then another, then a toast, a song, a dare, one for the road, one for the poor soul being carted off to the gallows, one to settle the nerves, and well, one more just because. Before long, the tavern blurred into a ship's deck, swaying beneath our feet. The night danced, staggered, and slurred its way into the history books. Somewhere between 3 sheets to the wind and painting the town red, we carved a legacy, not just of inebriation, but of expression. Because when humans drink, we talk. We explain our indulgences, excuse our regrets, we toast our triumphs, and we nurse our hangovers. All with language soaked in story. Welcome back to Lexicon, the show that sobers up some myths and serves the truth straight, neat, no chaser. I'm your host, TJ, and today we're throwing back 10 drinking-related phrases, chasing their origins, swirling their meanings, and sniffing out the myths. So, pop a top, pour a pint, or mix a cocktail. And let's begin with a myth that I've heard repeated on more than one popular podcast. So for our first word, hangover. Now, one popular myth says that hangover comes from the days of public executions, specifically the practice of spectators drinking themselves into oblivion before and after watching someone swing from the gallows. The result? Well, a wicked next day feeling dubbed a hangover. It's a dark and delicious image. People staggering away from a public hanging, clutching their heads, regretting the ale and the spectacle. But as vivid as that is, it's pure fiction. The real story is far less gruesome and way more metaphorical. You see, hangover originally meant exactly what it sounds like. Something that hangs over, lingers, or remains. In the late 19th century, it referred to things like leftover debts or emotional baggage. It wasn't until the 20th century that it morphed into the name for what your liver likes to call consequences. Oh, and fun fact, in German, the word for hangover is Kater, which literally means tomcat, and the implication there is that pounding, prowling headache is like an unwanted, prowling feline curling up in your brain. Our next phrase is one for the road. Here's another phrase that gets tied to the gallows. Because why not throw some execution lore into your everyday idioms? The story goes like this. Prisoners on their way to the gallows were allowed to stop at a tavern and have one final drink, a last toast before their last steps. That drink? Well, it was one for the road. And look, that's the kind of backstory that makes people smirk and raise their glass a little higher, but it really doesn't hold any water, or whiskey. There's no solid historical record of condemned criminals getting a pit stop at the pub. But the phrase doesn't even appear until the mid-20th century, long after the gallows had gone out of style. More likely, it's just a folksy way to say, let's have one last drink before you head out. No hangman required. Although ironically, in the modern world, one for the road is exactly the kind of drink you're not supposed to take, especially if you're the one driving. Our next phrase is a remedy of sorts, hair of the dog. Now, this one is both ancient and weirdly logical. The full phrase is, the hair of the dog that bit you. And it comes from medieval medicine because, of course, they tried everything. So if you were bitten by a rabid dog, some healers believed that you could cure the wound by placing a few hairs from that same dog directly on the bite, kind of fighting poison with poison. Now, fast forward a few hundred years, and someone decided that what works for dogs might work for drinks. Hungover? Just drink a little more of what made you sick. The phrase shows up in English as early as the 1500s, and while no modern doctor recommends it, the logic seems to have stuck around. So whether it's morning after mimosas or a greasy brunch cocktail, plenty of people still swear by this age-old remedy. It might not heal you, but at least it'll buy you a few hours of denial. The next phrase on our list is 3 sheets to the wind. And if you've ever staggered home from a bar and wondered why your legs weren't working right, you're probably familiar with this phrase. 3 sheets to the wind sounds like it belongs in a laundry room, but it's actually nautical. But pay attention, the word sheet on a ship is not the sail, as you probably would think. It's actually the rope that controls the sail. So if one sheet is loose, the sail flaps. Two, well, you start to drift. But when three sheets get loose, you're full on spinning. That ship is swaying like a sailor on shore leave. And by the 1800s, sailors were already using the phrase to describe drunkenness. And as anyone who's ever watched someone try to walk a straight line after a few too many knows, this is a really accurate metaphor. Oh, and bonus detail, some sailors even rated their drunkenness by how many sheets were loose. 1, I'm tipsy. 2, a little trouble. 3, well, you better start bailing water or, finding bail money. The next phrase on our list, Dutch courage. Now this phrase might sound charming today, but it was originally more of an insult than a compliment. During the Anglo-Dutch Wars in the 1600s, English soldiers observed Dutch troops drinking jenever, a strong juniper liquor that would eventually evolve into gin, before they headed into battle. Now the English, not one to miss a chance for a jab, started calling that alcohol-fueled bravery Dutch courage. The implication? Well, you're not brave, you're just buzzed. It was part of a larger trend of Dutch slurs in the English language at the time. Dutch treat, meaning you're paying for yourself. Double Dutch, meaning nonsense. And Dutch uncle, meaning someone who lectures you.
There are only two things I can't stand in this world. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch.
But over time, Dutch courage has softened. Today it's just the term we use for a quick shot before doing something brave. Or dumb. Sometimes both. Our next is a two-parter. On the wagon or off the wagon. And for some reason, here's another one that people love to link to executions. Because nothing pairs with drinking like gallows humor. According to this myth, prisoners were hauled to death on their water wagons and weren't allowed alcohol along the way. So to be on the wagon was to be sober, at least, until the end. But this story doesn't really hold up. The more reliable origin comes from the early 20th century temperance movement. People who gave up drinking claimed that they were on the water wagon, literally drinking water instead of booze, and it was a symbol of sobriety. And if you relapsed, well, you'd fallen off the wagon. The phrase stuck around, and today it's how we describe the ups and downs of anyone trying to stay dry. Still rolling, still bumpy, still a great expression. Next up, we have wet your whistle. Now, this one comes with one of my favorite little myths. You see, according to legend, tavern mugs used to have whistles baked into their handles. So when your drink was empty, you'd blow into the mug to summon the bartender. The whistle was essentially a call for refill. And sure, that sounds incredibly delightful, but it's complete nonsense. There's no historical evidence of whistle mugs, and think the acoustics alone would be awful in a bar. But the real story, well, it's just a poetic turn of phrase, where your whistle is slang for your throat or your voice, and to wet it simply means to take a drink. The expression, though, dates back to at least the 14th century, and even Shakespeare had fun with it. It's simple, it's elegant, a little bit cheeky, kind of like, a good cocktail. Up next, cup of joe. And you're probably asking yourself how this well-known euphemism for coffee snuck into our liquor language episode. But stick with me, because I included this one specifically for its popular origin story. You see, a leading theory said that Cup of Joe is named after Josephus Daniels, the U.S. Navy secretary who banned alcohol on ships in 1914. So the strongest drink left was coffee. And legend continues that soldiers, in protest to the dry Navy, called coffee a cup of joe as kind of a slight to that Navy secretary. Another rumor actually ties the name to G.I. Joes, American soldiers who drank so much coffee during World War II that the drink became linked to them. Now, this story probably surfaced after the addition of the Americano, which was in fact a drink created specifically by and for American troops in the Italian theater of World War II who preferred to dilute that stout Italian espresso with some hot water. Then there's the linguistic theory that Joe, in the term cup of joe, comes from jamoke, which is a blend of Java and mocha. Which one's true? Well, that's hard to say. But the phrase first shows up in the 1930s, which would completely negate the World War II argument. And while Josephus Daniels' one-man stand for prohibition makes for a great story, it may just be a story. But still, it's a strong nickname for a strong brew. Moving back to the bar, we find our next phrase, booze. Now here's one that seems almost too on the nose. You see, there really was a man named Edmund, or as he preferred to label his bottles, E.G. Booze, without the E at the end. And he was a prolific importer and distributor of whiskey in 19th century Philadelphia. And his log cabin-shaped decanters were an early marketing ploy for his store, but they've become highly sought-after collector's items since then. So naturally, many people think that the word was attributed to this aptly named merchant. But nope, the word booze, as a verb meaning to drink heavily, actually goes back to Middle English. The word bus was used as early as the 14th century, and it likely comes from the Germanic root meaning to drink. E.g. booze might have added some flair, but the word had already been around for centuries. Still, if your last name is Booze and you get into the liquor game, well, that kind of feels like destiny. Our final phrase for the day, paint the town red. Now this one actually has a proper riot attached to it, and I love this story. In 1837, a gentleman by the name of Henry Beresford, who was the Marquis of Waterford, a wealthy and rowdy noble, he took a group of his friends to Melton Mowbray in England. Well, unfortunately, they were refused passage through the toll gate due to their already inebriated state. So what do? You turn around, you go back home? Nah. They grabbed some nearby pots of red paint and proceeded to embark on a drunken riot that would be remembered, at least as a proper metaphor, for eternity. They attacked the toll keeper, the constable, and then painted them red. They went on to drunkenly paint the toll house's door and virtually everything they came across stumbling through the streets with their stolen red paint. Unsurprisingly, the phrase stuck. These days, paint the town red means to party hard. Although I don't think any of us intend to actually conduct renovations, but this phrase is rooted in a very real, very messy night out. So what have we learned? Well, drinking and language go hand in hand, not just in the act, but in how we explain it. We mythologize it. We soften it. We make it poetic, funny, even tragic. The hangover becomes a hair of the dog. The goodbye drink becomes one for the road. And a shot of gin becomes courage. These phrases survive not because they're accurate, but because they feel so true. They carry the echo of past generations, some real, some imagined, all raising a glass and leaving their mark on language. And whether you're on the wagon, off it, or somewhere in between, I'd say that's worth a toast. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lexicon, and if you did, don't forget to like, follow, and share with friends. It really does help. As always, Lexicon is written, recorded, and produced by me, your Logophile companion, TJ Martin. Thanks for listening.